Hello everyone, welcome to another video in this full stack Flutter development series. In this video, we'll begin to look at state management for our restaurant module by creating our restaurant state and also our restaurant Cubit. As you can see here from my folder structure, we now have three modules. We have the auth module that we did some time ago. We have the common module and our restaurant module. And so in order to access our restaurant module inside of our application, which is in our lib folder, we have to go into our pubspec YAML. And just as we had done for our auth, we'll do the same here by saying restaurant, and we'll put the path to our restaurant module. And by doing that, we give our application access to our restaurant module. So now inside of our states management, we'll go ahead and create another folder and we'll call it restaurant. And inside here we'll have two files. We'll have our restaurant Cubit and our restaurant state. And for our restaurant state, we'll quickly create that. So we have a few states that we will handle here. And I'm going to make this extends equatable so that we can have value or operator comparison between states. And I want to make this also a constant constructor. So now from our restaurant state, we are going to create a set of states, and the first one is the initial state, which doesn't accept any parameter or anything like that. It's just our initial state. And we need to override that one method for our equator or equatable. So that's our initial state. Next we have our loading state, which is similar to our initial state. So I'm just gonna copy and paste this. And change the name to loading. There we have our loading state. Next we'll have our restaurant, or instead our page loaded state. So this is when a page is loaded that contains a list of restaurants. And for this, I will have a list of restaurants, but as you can see, we do not have access to this yet, but we'll soon give access to that. and this will be a getter method that returns whatever is inside the page. So I'm going to create a variable soon called page, and this page will have the restaurants. So here, final page, we have our constructor, page loaded, page. We'll also have in this state to manage the next page. So I'm going to make that a getter also, next page, so that based on this state the UI can know what is the next page, and we'll pass that in to our API whenever we make subsequent calls, so we know where we are in terms of paging or pagination. So here, next page is going to be based on certain condition. The condition is that if the page is last, so if it's the last page, then the next page will be null. Else, the next page will be the page and the current page plus 1. So I'm going to get the current page from the return page, or the page that was loaded, and that will be plus 1 for the new page. Now I am just going to split my window here, and here I'm going to find my restaurant, and so now I can return or export the objects that I need. So in this case, I need restaurant, and I also need page. Page is inside of API page. Then if I go back here, I am now able to load this from the restaurant package, which is loaded here at the top. But now it's saying that there is no method is last for page. So we'll have to modify our page. So again, I will find the page that is inside the restaurant API, and here I'll add the isLast method. So the condition for a page being the last page, I am going to return a getter here, isLast, and the condition is that the current page, and this is what is returned from the server, is equal to the total pages. Again, this will be returned from the server, and as it stands, we do not have it. So what we have here as page size, we are going to refactor this to be total pages. So the total pages will be returned from the server, which is somewhat a formula or a calculation based on the limit that we set and the number of pages in the and the number of records in the database. So if we have 100 records in the database and we set the page limit to be 10, then it would be basically 10 divided by 10. So we'll have 10 total pages in order for us to get to the end of our restaurants that are stored in the database. But so we have that. We also have to change this inside of our API. So I'll find my restaurant API and I'll go where the error is, which is here, and I'm going to change this to total pages, and where I have a limit here, that will be total pages that's returned from the database. I believe I would need to change that also inside of the test. So restaurant test, find that, and where I have limit, in the metadata, where I have a limit here, we need to change this to total pages so that my test will continue to pass. So now that's refactored, that's fixed. We have our total pages. Now inside of our restaurant state here, we can now add our method for our equatable and pass in our properties. So in this case, the only property is the page. For our next state, we'll have our restaurant loaded state, and this is when a single restaurant is loaded based on ID. So we have our restaurant loaded state, and so we'll have our restaurant then our constructor and we override the property we'll also have our menu loaded state, which is our restaurant menu. So this is our restaurant menu, which will receive a list of menu items, or menus rather. And we'll override the property. As you can see, our menu is not loaded. So back to our restaurant library, and we'll export our menu. Now that is loaded. So our final state would be our error state. And our error state will have just a string message. So there we have all the states that we'll handle in our restaurant Cubit. So now for our restaurant Cubit, which will extend Cubit, and it's of type RestaurantState. So now for our restaurant Cubit, for its dependencies, we'll be handling a restaurant APIs using the contract. So restaurant API, and we'll accept also a default page size, the number of pages that we want per request. And then inside of our constructor, I'm gonna say this.api, and I'm going to make the pages an optional default size. So default page size, and I'll set that to say 100 pages. So I want 100 pages per request, which is a bit much. So we can set it to say 30 pages per request. Then I'll say the page size here is equal to the default page size. Then I call the super Cubit constructor with the initial state. So again, we need to export our API contract. So now here I can import it. So the first method we want to look at is the get all restaurants method, and this will accept the page or the current page number. So page, and then the logic is as start loading. I'll create these methods shortly. Start loading, then I'll fetch the result. So in this case, I'm gonna say final page result or results equal to the API get all restaurants, and I'm just gonna pass in the page here, page or private page size here, or default page size, and since this method uses await, we'll make it async. And then after the result, I'm going to say that if the page result is equal to null, or the page result, if the number of restaurants is empty, because there's a case where the page result is null if there's a failure in the request from the back end. Then there's a case where there's not a failure, but it returns an empty list of restaurants. So in that case, I'm going to say show an error here, and that method will accept a message. So I'll say no restaurants found. Otherwise, I'm going to say load page data, or set page data. This will update the state with the page result. So now here I can create these methods, private methods. So start loading. This will simply emit a loading state. Then I'll have set page data. This will accept a page result, and I'll say emit page loaded. This payload that will be with the result. Should be page this is the wrong page. Page this page. I think there's a confusion with the pages here, and I think it's from material library. So our required should come from the foundation library. So now we have our show error. Accept our error string, and then emits the error state with the error message. So now we have our get all restaurants Cubit method. So to test this, I am going to go ahead and inside of our test folder, remove this restaurant test since it's not necessary. Inside of our test folder here, I'm going to create a folder called states, and then here I'm going to create a file called restaurant Cubit test. Go ahead and create that void name. So we'll have our test here, and we'll have restaurant Cubit as our system under test. And then for our API, I am going to create a fake API, a fake restaurant API. And then I'm going to create a variable inside of our setup. I am going to say API API here. So API is equal to my fake restaurant API, and then my restaurant Cubit, or my SUT, called the restaurant Cubit, which uses that API. And I'm gonna give it a default page size of 10. So now we are going to create our fake restaurant API. So inside of our test, again, we're going to create a folder called fixtures, and then inside my fixture I'm going to say fake restaurant API. So this will need to implement our iRestaurant API. So here is our fake restaurant API, and for our fake restaurant API we are going to create a list of restaurants. We'll also use this fake API when we are going to render our UI before our back end is completed. So fake restaurant API, I'm gonna say accept an int, which is number of restaurants. So this integer tells how much restaurants should we generate. So we're just gonna say list generate, and we're gonna say length is number of restaurants. And then inside of our index, we are going to return a restaurant object. And we'll feed the data. But instead of us creating the data, we are going to go to our pubspec YAML file, and we are going to use a package known as faker to create fakes or fake data. But I want it inside my dev dependencies. So now that we have faker installed, we can go ahead and use it to create fake data. So I'm gonna say faker equal faker. So now I can say for the ID, I'm just gonna use the index to string. For the name of the restaurant, I'm just gonna use faker to generate the name. So faker company name. Then I'm gonna say type faker food cuisine, and then for the display image URL, I'm just gonna say faker internet just HTTP URL. Then for the address, I am going to create my address. So for the address, I think there's a clash with faker. There's an address field in faker, so I'm just gonna rename this FF, and here namespace it. So now the street would be faker address street name city faker address city. And for my parish, I'm just gonna say faker address, I am just gonna say country for now. So that's my address, and then my location. So for my location, I'm gonna say Faker, and I'm gonna use the random number generator. I'm gonna generate integers. So the max is 5. Then I'm gonna convert that to double since it's expecting a double. Copy and paste that. Here is the same thing. So that's my random list generating a number of restaurants and with different data using Faker. So now for my get all restaurants, I am just return. I'm gonna create a method paginated restaurants which accepts the page and the page size. So I've gone ahead and created the method which accepts the page size, and an optional filter which we'll use later on as a where condition. So what happens is that it determines the offset based on the page size. So the offset determines where in the array we should start when fetching a page. And then if there is no filter, then we're going to work with the entire list of restaurants. If there's a filter, we're going to create a new list using that filter. And then total pages would be the number of restaurants, or the length. You should be restaurants length divided by the size of a page, and we'll seal that just in case it's a decimal number. Then the result should be, we'll start at the offset to the page size and get that. Then we create our page with the total pages, list of restaurants, and we'll return that. So now back to our test. Import that from fixtures, and I'm going to say generate 19 restaurants. Then for my tear down method, I am going to just close the SUT since it's a stream, since Cubit is a stream. Just gonna close that. And then for our first test, so for our first test, I want to return the first page with the correct number of restaurants. So I call the method, pass in the correct page, which is page 1 in this case, and I'll use the expect later await to wait until the future is completed and check that this emits a page loaded state, and then I cast the page loaded state to get access to its variables, and then I check those variables to see that they're equal. They are what I expect them to be. So I expect the next page to be 2, and I expect the restaurant length to be 10, since that is the default that is set here in my restaurant Cubit. The same thing goes for the last page. I expect it to be 2, and I expect page loaded, expect next page to be null since it's the last page, and I'll expect the result to be 9 since I am working with 19 restaurants. Now if I should go ahead and correct this error here by making this method async, and if you're wondering where this matcher comes from, it's a Flutter package that you import it and namespace it, then you have access to the type matcher. So if I should go ahead now and run this test, so as you can see, we are getting a length error here. So the problem is I generated the list, but I did not assign my restaurants to that list. So now we have it assigned. We can go ahead and run again. So now we have our tests passing, or 2 tests for our restaurant get all restaurant method inside of our restaurant Cubit. So this method is working as it should. So I am going to stop there for now, guys, since the video is getting long. We'll continue to create our restaurant Cubit. In the next video we'll complete that, but for now I'm gonna stop here. So if you are enjoying this series so far, like, subscribe, share this video with someone, and the code is on GitHub as usual if you want to see it there. So see you in the next one.